Today in Master of Crafts program, custom-made dishware, interior and decor items made by Lviv glassblowers. What is traditional Ukrainian glassblowing and what does it represent in the 21st century? How an architect from Lviv revives the old glass craft and at the same time revitalizes the cultural life of the city. UATV is going to the reserve of blown glass, where new artifacts and ideas are born. 1918, 100 years ago. Not only the First World War, the most bloody conflict in the history of mankind, ended, but also an entire era had passed. Three empires fell into oblivion. Optimism and modernism of the early 20th century were replaced by cynicism and decadence. But not everywhere and not at once. It was the time when one of the most famous artists of the pre-war era returned to the newly formed Czechoslovakia, to his homeland. In Prague, he became absorbed in the creation of the official graphic style of the new state. He painted the samples of the first banknotes and postage stamps of the newly established state, one of the variants of the coat of arms, and even government forms and envelopes. In parallel, the painter worked on the Slav epic, a series of monumental paintings depicting major milestones in the history of the Slavic peoples. This man was a commercially successful illustrator, and at the same time, he was a talented painter. Alphonse Mucha was the giant of the era, even when everyday trifles had to be aesthetic, both an expensive picture and ordinary postcard. This philosophy surprisingly echoes the state of affairs in modern Ukraine, where only after 2014, local masters came to be appreciated as suppliers of not only haute couture and art, but also everyday handicraft items. Due to competition and high customer request, each craft turns into art. Respect for those masters who make items of the highest quality, have the experience and have good taste. It turned into art, and they have come to be called painters. Oles Dzindra is a person who offers aesthetics and ideas in various forms. Alphonse Mucha made posters and postcards on custom order, while Oles, as the owner of the glass workshop Guta, makes dishware and souvenirs on custom order. The Czech artist promoted Slavic patriotism in the spirit of the 20th century, while the Ukrainian founded a platform for the talented masters of the 21st century. People come to the Museum of Ideas and bring their ideas. They can bring them in the form of a customized concept video, which will be exhibited here as a display. It does not matter whether it's an object, an installation or a performance. The main thing is the idea. How did it happen that one man of art combined several roles at once? Is it possible to define the border between the glass-blowing craft and glass art? And in what area of contemporary Ukrainian art did Oles Dzindra leave his trace? The need for daily glass objects emerged several thousand years ago. As is often the case, today it is believed that with the advancements of high technology, people are obligated to settle for randomness. Once upon a time, the Egyptians unsuccessfully baked a piece of soda with sand, and it turned into glass. They then understood that it was the material for a new craft and started to blow glass. Guta glass is produced very quickly by hand from hot glass. This is a very specific niche. The term Guta is familiar not only to Ukrainians. It comes from the old High German language, and in the general sense it meant an industrial furnace under a roof. In Ukrainian and Belarus, Guta is glass manufacturing, and in Poland it is called manufactory, smelting metal from iron ore. However, the founders of the glass fashion have always been outside the Slavic world. There are world schools of traditional glassblowing in Costa Boda in Sweden, in Germany, Italy, Mallorca, Spain, Andalusia, and Syria. They were everywhere, where beautiful and practical things were in high demand. The most famous is Venetian or Murano glass. Masters from the island of Murano near Venice were considered the most skillful from the 15th to the 18th centuries. Their craft was revived after the decline. In Soviet times, small Ukrainian gutas were rounded up in factories, but this made them more vulnerable to the imminent shock waves. First of all, I'm an architect, but I also graduated from the Lviv National Academy of Arts. I engaged in glassblowing after the graduation from the academy, and the collapse of the Soviet Union. At that time, our sculpture factory, which was one of the best factories in the Soviet Union, went into decay. First of all, I felt sorry for the masters of these factories. Secondly, glass is a very good material, and I was truly excited about this craft. It was in my heart and soul. In such a way, Oles established his own Guta. He invited unemployed masters to join him in his venture and fulfilled a part of the orders on his own, which were previously produced by the factory. In the first 20 years of existence of the Guta, 90% of our products went for export. The sellers of the glass wrote "handmade in Venice" on my products. I was enraged by this and said, I will write the name of my firm on my products, not understanding that I could lose all my clients, as this product did not sell well without such an inscription, and almost nobody knew about Ukraine then. Today, the workshop of Oles Zindra is the only private and non-mass glass production facility in Ukraine. At the same time, his products can be found in Lviv restaurants and in national memorials. Especially for UATV, the artist demonstrates what the mastery of modern glass blowers entails. How it is made. The main thing in glass-blowing production is a furnace. Its operating principle reminds one of a blast furnace, while a pottery kiln is fired up only when it is necessary to burn in ceramic ware. A furnace operates without a break. It will take us more than a week in order to warm up a furnace to the temperature of 1380 degrees, because the furnace is made of the most state-of-the-art materials that require what is called aging. Then the furnace has to operate at a constant temperature and on 24/7 regime until it goes out of service. Usually, the expiration date of a glass furnace is from 1 to 5 years. To take a break, you need to slacken the fire in the furnace to about 600 degrees, but you should never turn it off. That is, even when the work is not being done, the Guta consumes gas. In the Middle Ages, it was necessary to regularly throw firewood or coal into such a furnace. First, Oles ordered ready-made furnaces, but then he began to buy materials and construct them by himself. Also, raw materials similar to that of 100 years ago is used. Natural salt, potash, soda and saltpeter. Our glass contains 74% of sand. I want to boast that Ukraine has the best sand for glass production. It is mined from a sand pit in Kharkiv region. It is exported to all countries of the world, and this is really the best white sand for glass production. We also received material from Kharkiv region. To stir and melt this mixture in the furnace is a matter of technique. True art begins when a master takes out a wad of glass from the furnace into the air. From this moment, the countdown goes until the hardening of the glass piece. It takes several minutes to shape it. One master can hardly cope with such a task, which is why today glassblowers always work in a team of 2 or 4 persons. In the olden days, people worked in bigger teams because a lot of people worked with charcoal and even more people worked with bellows. Today, the process is seemingly much simpler because the number of workers at the factory was reduced as they were replaced by mechanisms and devices of a higher technology. But the main work of collecting the glass and making a jar is done by the masters. So the titles of the professions are also corresponding: a collector and a blower. One master gathers the glass by winding it on a pipe and blows out the jar with a bubble of air inside. This workpiece is the basic framework of the glass blowing tradition. After that, the master winds even more liquid glass on it, and the second master forms the future product into a concrete shape. The third one helps him to perform specific operations, like cuts and dabbing on a metal surface. All the members of a well-trained team understand one another without any instructions. Everything has to be done very quickly. The longer you process the object, the more likely it will be that you will not manage to kiln the glass in time, and it will simply break in your hands. That's why the masters have to work closely with each other. They have to feel one another, just like 2 pianists playing the piano on stage together. Besides that, the craftsmen use the same instruments which were used 100 years ago: boards, pincers, a roller, scissors and other tools. After the art processing, which takes no more than 10 to 15 minutes, the glass object needs to be tempered in a special electric oven within 24 hours. That is to say, from the initial temperature of 640 degrees, to be exact from 580 to 640 degrees, the temperature gradually reduces to the room temperature. As a result of such tempering, the glass object becomes monolithic. If the glass is not burned out, it can fall apart like the sand from which it is made. Nowadays, the firm of Oles Dzindra fulfills orders of non-profit ecological organizations. These are prizes in the form of a drop. The firm often produces unique glassware for restaurants and other catering establishments, while a glass factory can fulfill an order only from 1,000 objects and doesn't agree to make every design. A Guta can produce even 10 wine glasses, and they will be more valuable and aesthetic than those produced by a factory. Oles Dzindra has a restaurant in the central Lviv, and it is not hard to guess what dishware and interior elements are in this restaurant. We put the workpiece in cold water. The bottom of the bottle splits off. In order to avoid cracking, the bottom of the bottle is welded. It looks like this, however the cracks remain. Can you see them? Oles Dzindra also makes historical dishware. There is a whole exposition of various schools and techniques in his restaurant. About 20 years ago, he received an order for a large batch of glass objects in the style of the 17th century. You can see them in the historical drama film With Fire and Sword by Jerzy Hoffman. However, as the real pride of Oles is in Kiev, these are glass elements exhibited at the Memorial to Holodomor Victims National Museum. All the crosses of different sizes were produced at our Guta over several months. Later, they were installed in huge concrete blocks. Each of them is cast in one copy. Looking at each of them separately, you can see their exclusiveness and the uniqueness of the people. It's not just millions of dead people. They're individuals, and this is important.
Це окремі люди. І це важливо.
I really like the interior. I'm glad that I was involved in designing it. Oles Dzindra channels the proceeds from the execution of orders for various conceptual projects of the city, from the craft fair to the festival of classic music with concert and lecture programs. The artist emphasizes that he only gives a push start to these projects, and further they develop at the expense of the city and sponsors, or they cease to exist. But in the same way that Oles Dzindra keeps his glass furnace in a constant service, he tries to do everything possible in order that the cultural life of Lviv continues to exist. The city has to live its own life. Ideas change the city, and the city changes the mindsets of the local residents. It may seem that special people who know everything and are originally Europeans live here. Lies. They have a very good teacher. This is their city. After all, a place and an environment form a person's world outlook. The essence of the city is precisely generating new ideas, which in their turn incite future initiations. Only in such a case does the city exist and live. Otherwise, it will be some sort of monument where people walk, look at plaques and say, "This is a monument of the 18th century, how cool it is." And why is it cool? The main cultural project by Oles Dzindra, titled The Museum of Ideas, is aimed at revealing new names in this form of art. In the framework of one of his collaborations with young painters, the master offered them to express their ideas by using glass. One of the works, titled The Destruction of Time, became the element of the interior. Clock mechanisms are fused into a transparent clock face, and the closer to the end, the greater the chaos. And this is only the smallest element in the mosaic, which Oles Dzindra has been collecting all his life. I would prefer to say that I am a provocateur, because an instrument is more complicated. This is a technology, while a provocateur is an illiterate idealist who instigates other people to come to life and say, "What a wonderful life." In such an interesting way, Ukrainian glass-blowing traditions are intertwined with the cultural process of contemporary Ukraine, which is today experiencing a burst of modernization and is revamping its image.